G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast with our AFL Fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns and the players that are going to bring value to your draft and Keeper League teams. My name's Heff and I've got some disappointing news. The Oracle isn't joining us tonight, so I'm just here with my co-host Dossie, just I say, but it's still a quite a good acquisition.
That is some disappointing news though, but we're expecting to see K's back shortly, hopefully.
Well, I think it's just more disappointing because we hyped it up last week that he was going to be back, and you were even saying you were looking forward to talking less this week. So.
Would have been nice. Would have been very nice. But we did have a chance to record with K's last night.
We did, so we can kind of talk about that. But we had our defender rankings. We recorded a podcast last night for our members. We went through our top 50 defender rankings. So we did an ISO recording with K's involved. So members will get that tomorrow. Just tomorrow morning, essentially. Russell Beasley immediately is gone no in the chat, so he's pretty disappointed that Kays is not here. But he's also wrote not that you guys aren't awesome, so good backtracking there, Russell. But anyway,
thanks, Russ. Russ.
So we recorded our defender rankings last night, so that'll be available for members tomorrow. So if you're not a member, sign up, get onto that because we did things a little bit differently this year, Dossie, which was pretty interesting. Because there's three of us, we actually averaged out our ranks to give you an overall ranking. So we combine the three separate ranks and then you can average them out to kind of get a guide where we all kind of meet in the middle.
I think it worked pretty well. I think on a few that we were very different ends of the spectrum, I think it just kind of gives you that level playing field. And, there's probably a couple that end up being in there that, maybe we don't agree on. Yeah. But I think it's a good system anyway. There
was a few that were funny that say one person went really high on and then the other person went really low on and the other person was bang on where they were ranked. So it just ended up in the same spot anyway. But it was an interesting system. So that'll be on the website. That will, you'll be able to check all that out. You'll be able to sort them by our own ranks as well as the overall. So you can see what Dossie's top 100 is, my top 100 is, Kay's is, and the overall too. So it's all pretty user friendly.
You'll just be using mine because I'll be
I'll wait and see what happens there. But anyway, out tomorrow, sign up as a member. But Dossie, have you got over the weekend, mate? Are you okay?
I'm still recovering.
So for those people who aren't really sure what we're talking about, the hottest 100 was on the weekend and we were beaten by the Wiggles.
We had
the Paddy Dow song.
Yeah. I listened to the hottest 200 as well just to see if we snuck in, but
I'm pretty sure we were 201.
So we got message from the Jays that that's where we snuck in. But the Paddy Dow song, not to be, but Heff, we might have something in store that might win us at next year or this year.
Yes, so stay tuned. We started a bit of work on something, a little something for the listeners out there. We won't give too much away yet because it's very much in its infancy, but there may be another little tune that'll be sticking in your ears sometime before the preseason, before the season gets underway. So, we'll keep working on that. Anyway, Dossie, which teams are we looking at tonight?
We're looking at the G's, and we're going to start with Geelong.
All right, we're going to get stuck in right now. We are going to be looking at Geelong first up. So the Oracle did the notes for this one, but he's not here. He was kind of a late minute out, or a later-ish minute out. So we've got his notes here, so we'll read through them, have a bit of a conversation about what he's written. I'm sorry if it doesn't flow as well as it would have if he was here reading them out, but it is what it is, I guess. So the first player the Oracle case is looking at is Max Holmes. So he's a guy that you are quite big on. I'm pretty big on him as well this season after a bit of a different role. We kind of saw him play towards the end of last season where he kind of moved up to a wing a little bit. Is that the thing that piqued your interest? Or
I quite like him as a potential inside player in the future, guy that can really tackle, obviously has a background in long distance and that sort of, I think he's, a former, one of sort of the Mark Blissarv's camp of can really, get around and run. And he could lay a tackle. Like, look at his last 4 games, 3 tackles, 4 tackles, 3, and then 7 in the last round. And this is all in limited time on ground. Also, you just look at the fact that Geelong, they're struggling to have many in the youth department, as we always joke about. But Holmes fits that mould. And I think, he's a guy that going forward is going to be someone that's coming through that isn't the Parfits and isn't the Narkles that we can look at and say this is a guy that has the promise for the future, and that's where I see him as a stash kind of option. But
it's just nice to have someone new that Geelong and someone that isn't over 30. But
if he gets more time on ground, 68% last year, I can see him actually making a pretty big leap this year if there's a spot for him in there.
So just going through Kay's notes, he averaged 56.6 in his 7 regular season games. Averaged 6 kicks, 8 handballs, and 3 tackles per game. Played 2 of the finals as well, including the prelim, so it kind of shows he's in the best 22 there if you're playing finals games. His best fantasy game was in round 23 against the Demons, where he had 18 touches, 7 tackles, and 74 points from 65% time on ground, mind you. In the semi against GWS, he had 10 touches and 8 tackles there, so it was a pretty good performance.
There's those tackles again. That's what I'm looking at for him.
Yeah. So he won the Cats Best Young Player Award. Kaz is written here, assuming that's valid for anyone under 30. Good one. So, yeah, we think he's a bit of a talent. And, yeah, if he can get into the Cats side, he should be quite promising, just given he's a lot younger than the rest of them. The little knock he's got here is that in 6 out of these 9 games, his kick-to-handball ratio was a bit rubbish. So he had more handballs and kicks in 6 of those games. But, you know, he's a youngster in a side. He wants to dish the ball off to the big dogs. They're probably demanding it, so we'll give him a bit of a break there. He's got DPP this year, so he's centre forward. Bit of a free swing there if you're going to recruit him. And then, Kays has got written here, he thinks if the Cats season starts tanking, there's a huge chance of more responsibility. So Max Holmes, that's the first one for Geelong. Anything else you want to add there, Dossie?
Nah, so I was trying to find out. He finished the year running an elite 2.8 seconds for the 20-metre sprint. So he's the sort of the short burst, but also can score. He scored pretty well on the yo-yo. So just all-around athlete. So that the time on ground factor for him coming into year 2, if we do think he can take a step up, that's where you might be able to see a bit of a improvement, because he can clearly run all day, but he just hasn't got that opportunity yet.
All right, we'll move on to the next Geelong player, and that's Jonathan Segler. So another young whippersnapper they brought in, 30 years of age. Bright spark there. But anyway, he's a proven fantasy scorer when he plays, but just Kay's a little bit concerned where he fits. I'm not actually concerned about him, but I'll just go through what Kay's has written here. So he's saying that Stanley, Segler and Radigalia, he's not sure if they can all play when you factor in Hawkins and Cameron, and I do sort of agree there. But anyway, we'll talk about his stats. So he averaged 76.4 in 12 games at the Hawks last season. Got around the ground well. He averaged 6 kicks, 9 handballs, 4 marks and 21 hit-outs per game. He's only kicked 2 snags, but he wasn't really playing as a forward last year, so I don't think you really have to worry about that too much. When he was playing, he was generally the number 1 ruck. So he's going to be a ruck option only. Dossie, do you think he's a number 1 ruck option at Geelong?
I think he'll out-duel Stanley for that mark. I think they've always just been trying to find someone to fill that role. And 19 hit-outs a game for Stanley. I know he kind of played a little bit of a dual ruck role as well, but I don't know. It's just they've always been seemingly looking for someone to fill that void, and Segler's been waiting for that opportunity for so long, living in the shadows of McAvoy. I think he can take it. Stanley's 31. I think Segler's only, slightly younger than him. So it is going to be a battle, and they might run with 2 in the end. But I'd probably think Segler's the guy to get that role. Yeah,
I think they can play with Radigalia, Cameron and Hawkins in the forward line, with Radigalia kind of pinch hitting in there. I don't think 3 talls for them is really out of the option, because a lot of clubs do it. So
Radigalia can be the guy that plays key forward for most of the game and goes in there just for it. That's what he's generally done. I don't think they want him in there too much. It's just to let the other ruck get out. But I would suggest that they'd want to see that, but who knows how happy they were with Stanley last year. He had a pretty solid year, but
he gets dropped a lot though. So
he does. Sure. So that's why I think they went out and filled a need. I think he'll be straight in there.
They're having a premiership tilt. They found probably the best backup ruckman in the competition, because he's better than Stanley.
They've been looking for it for a long time. They've finally got their guy, and he's 30, but 30-year-old ruckmen tend to, before we've seen the new wave of ruckmen that have dominated at 23 and 24, like your Grundys. Before that, we saw a lot of guys take their time and ruckcraft. It took to the late 20s and the 30s to really hit their prime. So, Segler could have a really big year.
All right, we'll move on so we don't spend too much time talking about Segler. But I'm high on him. If you kind of need a ruckman, obviously he's not one you're looking at for the future, but he's definitely got the potential to go 80+ as your ruck. So you'd be pretty happy with that if you can pick him up pretty late in the draft. Next one is Sam Simpson. So he caught everyone's eye in 2020 when he got the call up in round 6 against the Lions. He scored 102, which was 126 BCV back then. Jumped into everyone's classic team from that point onwards and made a heap of cash over the first few weeks. But his stayed in the side until round 12, but never hit the heights again. Everyone had him on their watch list last year, but he only managed 3 games. I think he played final as well in there, but limited time on ground as well. Didn't really play a midfield role like he did in 2020 either. Kays reckons he looks a little bit one-paced, and then 2022 is actually going to be his 6th year on the list. So I guess if we haven't seen something by now, it's probably looking more unlikely that we will see something. Their forward line looks pretty settled. He reckons Holmes seems to have bypassed him, but yeah, you and I think he's going to move up to the midfield probably a little bit more. They've got Stengel in as well, so yeah, Kays has gotten here. He reckons it's going to be hard for Simpson to get a gig this year. What do you think? Do you reckon anyone should be putting him in their black book, or is he someone you're putting a line through?
I think when I was doing my rankings, like in the forward, because he's available as a forward this year, it's tempting just because the option or the temptation to give him that role around the midfield is there, given he is that 23-year-old. And he was injured a lot of last year, wasn't he? I think that's why he missed a lot of time particularly last year. So
I can't remember. Yeah.
I believe he had an injury. I might be wrong there. Maybe look that one up while I'm...
Yeah, I'll just check I'll check the VFL numbers.
Yeah, I thought he had some injuries. But anyway, I kind of think that there is that opportunity for him to get in there, and they lost a couple in the off-season. The veterans, they're not getting any younger. I just think there is going to potentially be a chance, and given the slim pickings that we have in the forward line, he could end up being one that pops, especially if we see, some protocols go around and he gets an opportunity and gets to manage to stay there. It's something that you could look for.
Yeah, it looks like he only played 2 VFL games for the season as well, so it looks like there was a few injury concerns.
A lot of it was just injuries. So.
Yeah, but I don't know. The 2020... the way he kind of started and then just tapered off and ended up as a forward, that just didn't fill me with any confidence either. That's all. And you guess like the next wave, you've got Parfitt, Narkle. They want to bring someone like Cooper Stevens in eventually. Yeah. I just don't know where he's going to sit in that midfield mix, and that's the only way he's going to be a good scorer. So that's the only thing that concerns me. We'll move on to Jack Henry. So he's a defender that Kays has plenty of time for. He was actually runner-up in the Cats' best and fairest. I did not know that. From a fantasy point of view, he's pretty consistent. He averaged 66 last season and had average of 70 from his last 5. He just rarely puts up a bad game. He had 5 out of 21 games under 60, so that means he doesn't really go under 60 that often. I think that's what Kays is trying to say there. Also had a 99 and a 96 high scores of last year. So he reckons he could be a D5 with just good bench cover. Averaged 14 touches and 6 marks. And Geelong's game style coming out of halfback, he is actually quite good for fantasy with the way they move it. The major issue for him, he has a foot issue at the moment, and he's in a moon boot. So at 23-year-old, he can easily kind of progress into a attacking defender as he kind of goes on though. Look, he's never going to be a dominant defender. He's not going to be a huge fantasy scorer, but Kays is liking him to maybe someone like Nick Haynes. Has to be that low mid-70s average. Nick Haynes had a few seasons where he went in the 80s as well, didn't he? A couple there. So, I don't know. What do you think? Last week we talked about Oliver Henry featuring on the socials a lot. What do you think about Jack Henry?
Yeah, I actually have a bit of time from him as well. It's probably right where, Kays is kind of saying, I wouldn't say his ceiling's up. He's got a big, 1 game, 2 game ceiling. He can get a bunch of marks, and he is that kind of player that can win you a game as that streamer or in that D5, D6 slot. So I do like him as an option. I wouldn't be expecting too much, the world from him. You're saying he's coming into an injured preseason as well, which
apparently so.
Yeah, don't like that too much, obviously. His athleticism is just off the charts, though. He can read the ball well, and you'd imagine kind of as the guys, move on, like your Hendersons and your Blitzarves, that they're going to be looking for a guy down there to be that strong mark. Probably the 70 to 80 is that ceiling of his IC, but I don't mind it as that D5, D6 like Kays is saying.
Yeah, I also see 80 as the ceiling, but if that's your D5, you're not complaining with that. I'll take a 70 in that position every day of the week. At least as long as it's consistent, I don't mind it. No. We'll move on to Nick Stevens. So I'm pretty sure he played for Port Adelaide and Carlton and retired years ago. But I couldn't actually pick this guy out of a lineup, but he's in Kays' notes. And this is his gut feel flyer for the Cats, this young defender, Nick Stevens. So he had a solid debut season at VFL level, playing 8 matches for a 77 average. He had 103 points in round 12 there. Big raps coming on him coming out of the 2020 draft. Classy ball user and a good decision maker. He's quite tall as well, 192 centimetres. So he could play that third tall role in defence and be kind of fantasy friendly there. With solid VFL numbers, But yeah, hardly played any footy in the last 2 years. He's a bit of an unknown. We saw Lockie Henderson depart last year, which could free up a spot. There's still Blitzarves, Colin Jasny, Jed Buse, Jack Henry, and Tom Stewart obviously back there. But yeah, look, he's going to probably need another season or two to develop, but he's a black booker for Case, someone that he is going to stash for if he can get his hands in him, I think. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, like the raps on him is, pretty quick, pacey guy. That's what Geelong are sort of spruiking up in their media releases of him when they first drafted him. And Geelong don't have many of that sort of type. Especially once your Tuies and your Stewart, they're the two guys that'll do it. Aside from that, there's not a stack of pace. It's kind of why we say, the old Geelong side. He could bring that different dynamic, and I wish we had the Oracle here to tell us exactly his feelings on this and where the gut feel is coming from. But in that sense, that's probably where I'd say he's coming from.
I'm sure, knowing the Oracle, he's watched every VFL tape, he's gone through it, he's studied it, he's had the pens out. So no, don't trust this one, definitely. Anyway, you got a bit of an honourable mention for one last player, Dossie.
Yeah, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for a man, Zach Guthrie, and I tell you what, he's actually been on my bus for a number of years. The moment that he stepped foot on an AFL field, he looked basically like he'd come just off out of high school graduation kind of thing. You can see now he's definitely been in the Heff school of gym work in the off seasons preceding. But he's been at the club for 5-6 years now.
Yeah, he's been there for a while. Yeah,
finally came in and managed to get a decent gig, and playing 10 games. I expect him to build on that this year. He showed a lot and was included in the final side. Now I know there was a couple of injuries at the time, but we saw his ceiling in round 20, and I think we were looking pre-show who was out. Now it was maybe a Mark O'Connor
was the one that was out.
That was kind of a late withdrawal. Yeah. Comes in. 13 marks, 24 kicks, 4 handballs, 24 kicks and 13 marks. And that was with Tom Stewart inside. He was just seagulling around.
Stewart turned up that day as well.
Doing what he pleased. The next game, 75 and then 62. He stayed in the side for the next couple. I think he got dropped for around 23 perhaps. Came back in the finals, and I think he went at about a 75 as well. So, he can put up scores if selected. 23 years old. Who's coming through for the Cats in that defensive line? I think we've found our man, and Heff, he's my boy this year. Lock him in. Get in Zach Guthrie inside as that late flyer. Really like him for a season 2022 breakout.
All right, I missed the camera switch there, Dossie, again, but I'll fix it up in post. I'm sorry about that. I need a little bit more warning. Anyway, that wraps it up for Geelong, and we'll move on to the next side. All right, I was put in charge of the Gold Coast Suns, so I've picked 6 players from them. Now, no, you boys didn't want to do Gold Coast. Neither of you were that keen to actually have a look through a list, but I thought there's a few relevant names here.
Oh, there's stacks. It's that there's too many to choose from.
Is that the issue?
Don't want to do that all that way, man. Leave that to you.
Didn't want to narrow it down, so thought you'd spoil me with all the riches
so
that are from the Gold Coast.
I'm sure you will get to this in your notes, but there's just so many midfielders vying for spots that aren't there, and it's who's going to pick them, and picking those breakouts, which we've put on you, is a tough ask.
Luckily, I've only picked one midfielder.
You've got to really delve into the mind of the Stewie Jew and find out what's going on in there.
Do. I don't know how much footy. No, I won't go there. That's all right. All right. First player I'm going to talk about is Jeremy Sharp. So this guy only played 2 games in 2020 for an average of 31, but he really burst onto the scene last season. Came into the side in round 15 and played every game. I think every game, or all but one onwards from memory. His first 3 games had solid scores of 79, 62 and 61, and then went bang in round 18 where he turned up, had 123. Round 19, he backed it up again with 112 fantasy points there. Ended up with an average of 71 from his 9 AFL games in 2021. Had an injury affected last round as well, so that would have been 79 without that game in there. He was an elite junior scorer. He averaged 118 at Waffle Colt, so he comes from some good fantasy pedigree. The one minor thing that I'll probably mention is I guess he only got the opportunity after Lockie Weller got injured. Weller was playing forward earlier in the season, but did move on to the wing the weeks prior. Was playing a little bit of wing time on there, but when he got injured, he came straight back in. But the other kind of outlier as well, and for the record, I don't see Weller going back onto that wing, so don't stress about that. But the main outlier is the weeks that he went big was when Brandon Ellis was out. So I think Brandon Ellis got injured in the week he went massive, was out the next week where he went massive. As soon as he came back in, he went back down again. So when Ellis was out, he was kind of like number one outside runner that they'll use on those wings and stuff like that. But the thing is, he showed so much potential that I think he's got a best 22 sewn up for 2022.
Was that... So I'm looking at his scores now. So you're talking big, against Western Bulldogs and Brisbane too, which is pretty impressive, but that's beside the point. So you're saying you reckon he probably came back in at that round 20 against Melbourne, which is where he went from 112 to 34. Is that around about when you reckon Ellis might have come back in? Because that's a significant difference. But then did he stay in? Because after that, he... sorry to put you on the spot, mate, with finding out who's in the team. But if he went after that 88 and 74 in the preceding week. So I don't know if he can do that with Ellis in the side, far out,
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, Dossie, I'm a little distracted here because I think the stream has actually just gone dark, but I'm not really sure what the go is there. But hopefully we're still up and running. I'll just double check that in a second, but they should still be able to hear us, so that's okay. I will move on to the next player here. Sorry, I'm a bit rattled now. We'll move on to Will Powell, and I'll try to figure out what's going on with this in a second. Actually, I might just pause here for a sec, and then we'll come back. Just give us a sec.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, stream is back up and running. I've got some editing to do. Accidentally bumped the fade to black button by my little finger here. And not to worry. We sorted that out now. Sorry to the people in the chat there. I might just get the full screen view for me up here again. Don't worry, people. I'll edit this out of the main podcast. That's the magic of working live. Anyway, we'll get stuck into. So next player I want to talk about is Will Powell. So he was one we've been suggesting is a likely type for a couple of years now. Played every game last season for an average of 72. Shifted from a wing to the halfback flank last week, and that was last year. And that was mainly due to his disposal efficiency. So he went at 80% last season. So the guy can use the ball incredibly well. Kicking efficiency of 80% too. So it's not just all the handballs they're counting as well. He actually just used the ball really well by foot. He only had one massive score, and that was 138 against Brisbane in round 21. But he's super consistent, had 10 scores over 80. He was the main kick taker for the year, slightly ahead of Jack Bowes as well. So he took 32% of the kick-ins for the season, but took 48% of them in the last 5 rounds. So that's when we kind of saw the coaches move out. Bowes was back there, but I think he was out injured for Bowes for a while and then came back in and wasn't doing as much. But yeah, so if he maintains those kick-out numbers for the entire season, basically we're getting that for, we're getting an extra 8 to 10 points per game, I reckon, on top of last year's average of 72. So I think he'll go easily in an 80 average this year if he plays the same role and gets the same responsibilities. What do you think? Yeah,
I'm huge on Will Powell this year as well. Showed a really big ceiling. Obviously had those kind of down weeks as well, which if he just maintains a consistent game, I think we see that. I think he's now going to be their number one distributor out of the defensive line, especially like we said, if Jack Lukosius is kind of making that move up the ground, or even if he comes back for a bit, I think Will Powell will develop that kind of role just coming out of defence. I think they've already released, the Suns have released some social media videos. I think it was just today.
Okay.
I
haven't seen them yet.
And there was Powley, the Gold Coast people yelling out Powley, nice kick Powley, nice kick Powley. There was a few really nice disposals, and I'd say he took up about 80% of that video, which, as we know, statistics-wise, that means he's in for a massive breakout. So, speaking of the kick-ins, though, that you mentioned, there is an article up on keeperleaguepod.com.au.
Go on.
Where I went through the top 5 kick-in people that could sort of benefit AFL fantasy-wise. The only issue is with him is that he only played on 60% of his kick-ins last year. So he's got to develop a bit of observable thirst, start taking that extra step out. So if he does benefit from these kick-ins, we can actually see it on the fantasy scorecard.
Yeah, hopefully that does come to fruition and he does boost those fantasy numbers this year. So he should be a real goer if he does. Now my camera switch is not working here, Dossie, so we're having a real good time on the stream, but that's all right. Don't stress too much. Might just leave it on this camera for now and see if it actually starts working. Let's move on to my next one. Matt Rowell. So we don't need to talk about this guy too much. He was riddled with injuries over his first 2 seasons, but had a monster first year, averaging 78 in his from 5 games in 2020. So that worked out to be a 97.5 BCV average there. But that included an injury affected score of 0, and then had 110 BCV average without that score in there.
Huge.
Yeah, it's pretty big for his first season. So he came back and was managed at the end of that season. 69% time on ground last season as well. So managing that time on ground. Spent a bit of time up forward from memory too last year. So he's coming into a third year. He's an elite talent. Averaged 123.6 in the NAB League in his draft year. So if the body stays right, he should finally explode next year. But yeah, it's just a matter of whether that body can hold up. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we know that he's a first choice, number 1 choice midfielder behind the likes of probably Touk Miller, and that's about it for Stewie Dew. So despite all the injuries and despite trying to work him back, he was still prominent in centre bounces even last year, and probably expect that those centre bounce numbers, which were kind of, I'd have to check, but I wouldn't say they were as massive as his rookie year, where he did kind of do that big breakout in his first year. So I think you can expect lots more centre bounces for Matt Rowell. Even if he's not scoring early, he's going to get all the opportunities too. Just expect a big breakout again, but at the same time, just that midfield mix for the Suns is so strange. I think Rowell's probably one of the safest ones behind Touk Miller, like I said.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, we'll move on to another player I wrote about for DT Talk last week, I think it was, and that was Elijah Hollands. So if it weren't for an ACL injury, this guy could have been the number 1 draft pick in the 2020 draft. He was considered the best midfielder of the 2020 draft crop, despite not playing a game that year due to COVID-19. If you take a look at his games from 2019, you see he put up some pretty handy numbers as a bottom major. He played 4 NAB League games for the Murray Bush Rangers, averaging 84.7 points, going at 11 kicks, 9 handballs, 6 marks, 4 tackles, and a goal per game. His best individual performance came against Gippsland Power in round 1 of 2019, where he had 12 kicks, 3 handballs, 10 marks, 3 tackles, and an AFL fantasy score of 90 points. So Dossie, an elite fantasy scorer, or not an elite, but as an underager, he was a pretty good fantasy scorer because he was playing against guys that were...
well, if he's considered to go number 1, then... That's pretty elite, considering a lot of our number 1 prospects that are going to be midfielders are basically always our number 1 scorers.
Yeah, absolutely. While those numbers might not look that good, I guess, he was playing as a bottom ranger. So anyway, we'll move on. So after being taken by the Gold Coast at pick 7 the following year, he spent most of the 2021 in rehab. He returned to football through the VFL, and then that was in June, and that was after 16 months out of the game. So he was managed quite heavily upon returning, but he did put up an impressive score of 95 AFL fantasy points in round 15, which included 16 kicks, 11 handballs, 3 marks, and 4 tackles. Now, we heard Gold Coast recruiting manager Paul Burns. He recently stated that Hollands is likely to be used as a midfielder and forward in 2022. Also mentioned that he could be used across halfback at times due to his elite disposal as well. So this indicates that an early season debut is likely for Hollands. So on the flip side, we only saw a 3-game sample size last year, so in the VFL, so that wasn't much. Didn't really give us much to go by. He might need another full year of playing in the VFL, playing footy to kind of show us what he can really do. And you just got to hope he doesn't get Stewie Jude as well. So, so many players that have potential that just don't actually come in through that side. I reckon you pick him up this year, but he's probably in Classic, he's probably going to be a goer if he plays because he'll make some coin because he's priced at 190k. But in the keeper leagues, I think he's more of a stash option. Would you agree?
Yes, because we haven't seen anything, but also I think probably the good example of this would be the Jeremy Sharp of last year, a highly touted junior that's come through the ranks, had a bit of time in the twos under Stewie Dew, not cracking in. He comes in, he looks like a ready-made fantasy stud. I know he did have his ups and downs, but we might be able to expect a bit more from Hollands. I don't expect Hollands to get a fantasy-friendly role. That's probably the only thing. Maybe he might be ready to go bang from round one this year. But I just don't see that role being there. Like we've said, the midfield is just so stacked. I think to start with, Hollands will probably just get, a spattering of centre bounces here or there, unless he is too bloody good to keep out of there. But it's good to hear that they're going to try him in a variety of roles. We get to get a good look at him. But you're right, it's going to probably be more likely a stash than an immediate on the scene breakout.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot of people got high hopes for him, but more so, I think a stash option for us this season. But anyway, we'll move on and we'll talk about Ben Ainsworth. So for me, he's just such a frustrating player. So he looked like a genuine mid-forward prospect a couple of years ago and attended less than 1% of the centre bounces last season. So that kind of mid-forward prospect is gone probably. At times last year, he wasn't even best 22. So he played 17 games for an average of 69.5. And when playing at the seniors, I guess he was playing as a forward because he was in the top 6 goal scorers for Gold Coast as well. So it's pretty important for him up there as well. I don't know, Dossie, I just can't see him getting back into the midfield. No. Given the scarcity of forwards as well, I think he's on the cusp for a lot of keeper teams. So a lot of people, there's a lot of questions out there whether he's going to, whether we should keep him or whether we should put him back. Right on the cusp, I think he's one of those players where you won't be judged either way. I think if you do put him back and he does go bananas, you can't really beat yourself up over that. But if you do keep him, there's always that potential he does go okay as well. So I think it depends on the circumstances of your team, but it could go either way. What do you reckon?
I think a lot of the role that you'd probably hope he gets into is that what they call the 5th or 6th role, where it's basically you've got your midfield group and then the 5th and 6th are those extra forwards, like we saw, I guess Caldwell played at the end of the very end when he didn't get back in. So around the centre around the stoppages around the ground, but not in the centre bounce. That's what you'd want Ainsworth to be super relevant. I think there's just too many players that are actual genuine midfielders that we're going to see him get that opportunity. So guys like Hollands that they're talking about playing potentially a bit of forward, I think it's a guy like him that'll get that role. And Ainsworth is going to unfortunately be stuck more in that kind of in-between. And I think that's why we saw, Darcy McPherson, who we thought might also get that role. He just hasn't been able to do it either. So, wouldn't be too hyped about Ainsworth, but just no centre bounces are coming, no midfield time's coming. He's going to have to do it all as a forward. Don't see it happening either.
Yeah, I'm off him for the time being until he can kind of show us that he can be a midfielder again. I'm not huge on him. The last one for me is Mabior Chol. He's a bit of a looser pick here, I guess, but he moved to the Gold Coast from Richmond, I guess to solve the ruck debacle at Gold Coast after last year where we saw Chrissy Burgess become basically the number one ruck last season.
It was a glorious time as well. Glorious time
I'm not sure how it's all going to work with Witts coming back with Chol, though, that is. I think he's in line to return round one. But yeah, he was injured in April last year, so that should be around the time that he does return. I don't know. Do you think there's a sneaky chance of forward status with as a ruckman? Do you think they're going to play dual rucks in there, or do you think he's purely there as backup there, Dossie? What do you reckon?
I think they're going to try. I would say that without just doing it. We need K's best 22 here so we can actually see the kind of lineup and think about the makeup. But I would think they're going to try and keep Witts at least slightly in a bit of cotton wool early, give him a little bit of a rest, because he's typically been a guy that is in basically every single stoppage, every single centre bounce, every single everything. You'd think coming off an ACL at his age, they're going to want that relief, and that's why they've brought Chol in, 24 years old, ready to go. They had a couple of backup rucks, these guys that they picked up in the mid-season draft and stuff like that, but I just think they've brought someone that can play right away, and I think he will play right away and, get that forward status. I don't know how fantasy relevant he's going to be, but if Witsy, hopefully he doesn't, but if there's injuries or anything like that, Chol could probably, there's no one else that will take that number one mantle, is there?
Nah, not really. So, yeah, if I reckon if Witts goes down, he's absolute lock. But, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I do think Witts will be slow to return, though, so I reckon they will play in tandem for a little bit. But I don't know how the fantasy scoring is going to go.
He scored well in low time on ground last year. 60 and 66% time on ground for Mummy or Troll. I don't think it's that loose a pick from you, Heff. Hasn't had an opportunity yet behind Soldo and Nank. So, who knows? He might have a little cheeky run if he gets the chance.
Well, hopefully that actually happens. Anyway, we'll move on here to let's get into GWS with Dossie. All right, Dossie, who are your GWS players for us?
Yeah, there's a big sound in town there, Heff, but we'll talk about a couple of guys first that I just want to quickly shout out. So I was thinking Lockie Ash might be able to get a chance to talk about him because I do love the man, but no, alas, he is 2G for P. One guy I am going to be able to talk about that's B2P, which I'll just explain for the new listeners. Too good for the podcast, too good to talk about for keeper leagues. Back to the podcast. An unlucky soul who is now able to be talked about on this very show because apparently they're not. They'll still be available in some keeper leagues and not be kept. So that one man that we're talking about, who I kind of controversially thought he probably doesn't deserve to be here because I think most people will be holding on to him, and in your new drafts he's still going to be highly regarded. But Stephen Canelio is the guy. Hashtag B2P. Back to the podcast. Couple of stinking years for Cogs. I don't think that Amazon doco did him any favours at all. Really just Leon Cameron piling it on him. An interesting bit of leadership from both Leon and Cogs, to say the least. But I just think also there's never any noise about Leon Cameron being on the hot seat, which just has always been like, I don't know. Anyway, it just seems like there's a great list a lot of the time and doesn't get a lot done. But Captain Cogs, he's actually been dethroned in a sense because he's now being joined by two co-captains in Kelly and Green. But Heff, can he join them on the field this year and play a few more games? Injuries ravaged him last year.
Yeah, I reckon he can, because all the reports that are coming out of him is just in ripping nick at the moment. Like he's looking like he's absolutely tearing up the track. I'm not sure where he goes in terms of like forward midfield. I reckon he probably just starts to move back into that midfield a little bit more, though, given that we're seeing a bit of a decent preseason out of him, getting a bit more fitness in. Injuries seem to not be annoying him as much as they were last season. I reckon he gets back to, maybe not to his best, but I think he definitely improves on last year, that's for sure.
Well, he started last year being, it seemed like Leon was making a statement in the first couple of rounds, given all the controversy of the year prior, and really tried to give him that confidence back, put him straight in the guts, was giving him every opportunity. Then he does the ankle, has terrible syndesmosis, and then a toe injury as well. From round 3, he was stuffed. Came back later in the year through the Magoos, I might add. Not just the one game for the captain, by the way. Had to put in 2 from Leon. Leon made him sit down there for 2. Goes big in the VFL, 107 average, including a 133 in that second game. Absolute tackling machine. Comes back in and really illustrates that tackling, but didn't score great and sort of had limited centre bounce attendances as well, just not in the midfield mix as much because they're vying for finals and they've got that established roster going. I think he will be back in the midfield mix. I think he's pretty much borderline. Shouldn't be talking about him on this show because, in my opinion, he's still 2G for P.
Rules are rules, mate.
Especially with forward status.
Rules are rules, and we make no exceptions for any player on this podcast. If you aren't in the top 150 scorers at the start of the year, you are back to the podcast, my friend.
Even injury affected?
Yep, don't care.
Okay. That's harsh. Anyway, Cogs will be back this year. Don't know what sort of...
going back. Injury affected because that throws doubt into whether you keep them and things like that, and just throws back what you think going forward. So, I think it does weigh up. Just say what type of
Especially
average?
Coming off a poor season the year prior as well.
Yeah.
So,
what type of average? Is that what you asked?
Yeah. What ceiling do you see from him? Do you think he's going to go... You don't need to put an average on it. Do you think he'll be one of their top 3 midfielder, like attendees, and in there all the time?
It's hard to tell because there's so many that will go through there and they'll all split out. But he'll be close. If not the top 3, he'll be top 4. Okay. I reckon he'll be just outside maybe.
All right. Well, it all depends on if this guy makes the cut as well, as to whether I'm going to talk about him, because Tom Green is my next player. A 72 average in 2021 from only 71% time on ground for the season. That's really nice. Points per minute there. 17 games as well, so getting a few. And he was at 41% centre bounce attendances, which, talking about percentages, the top end midfielders like your I guess like last year's breakout Parrish, right? He pushed up towards those 70% plus. 70% plus is like where you want to be as a midfielder. I think Tom Mitchell had 70%. The top guys like Lachie Neale would get 80 to 90%, just to frame, the top end kind of guys. So 40%, about half of that. All he needs is opportunity for this guy. So he's going to be a fantasy stud one day. He was basically fifth in line for those centre bounces as well. I think the saving grace for him is going to be Callan Ward, kind of.
Yeah.
Now they surely have to kind of bring this guy through. Look how many youngsters they've lost out of GWS, and it's been partially due to their cap situation, obviously, but they can't lose another one. Caldwell's gone, like Jack Steele's of the past. They've all gone, left GWS as a youngsters trying to get opportunity. Tom Green, they need to keep him around. I just think he's going to need to play more in there this year. I don't know who's going to be sacrificed. Like we said, there's just so many guys in there. But I think Callan Ward's the one that's maybe going to make way for a bit more Tom Green action this year. Are you interested in him?
Yeah,
in your keepers?
Yeah, definitely. I do agree with Ward. I think has to kind of take the back seat because he's the one that just kind of continually attends those centre bounces. That's why when I was thinking about Cornelia, I think there's always someone like him that goes there. But I do see I do think that he is going to succeed a little bit. The thing with Tom Green, I don't think it's a matter of having to find an opportunity. I think it's a matter of him commanding a role over one of their other midfielders. But the thing is, I think he's actually got the potential to do that. Like he's such a highly touted young player. It's more that you've got a few similar type of midfielders in that GWS side with him. And I think he does surpass one or two of them in the next couple of years. So I think just through natural progression, I think he's going to be a gun. So I've got no concerns if he doesn't, say, go big again this year. Say if he just mediocre average or around that 80 mark, if it's something like that, I still have no concerns because I think the progression is there that he'll actually turn into an elite player eventually. We just might have to be patient. It's not. I don't think it's actually going to become about role or who gets the opportunity, who's injured, and who's in that midfield mix. It's just about his development, I think.
Absolutely. And I'm just keen on him. Put up huge numbers in the VFL too, just when he did have obviously a much better role. So I think his points are just a matter of time before he gets that role. Like you said, time to command the role.
Exactly.
Get it done, Tom Green. I'm big on him. I think he'll be the guy that does it this year. So keep an eye out on that.
Yeah.
Braden Pruce. Gee, a guy that has promised the world for a number of years as the next ruck answer, but does he finally get the opportunity to do it this year, Heff?
If he's fit, yes. That's the only thing stopping him.
That's it. So he's always been stuck behind a better, more experienced ruckman. First at Goldie at North Melbourne. Then he decided the shrewd manoeuvre in free agency to go to a club that doesn't have an established ruck at all. Melbourne with Max Gawn. So he decides to go there. He'll topple Gawney as the number one ruck. I still don't understand that decision. I don't know. Anyway,
well, my thinking at the time was that he just didn't care. He just went to the biggest contract, and that's where it was.
Well, I don't know. Well, why would they pay two rucks as well?
No, I don't know.
Anyway, now he's finally at GWS. Arrives at GWS last year, expecting to be the number one ruck. Gets injured. So poor bugger. Does a peck in the gym as well. Heff, watch out for that one, mate.
Yeah,
watch out.
Haven't done that one yet. But.
Yeah, watch out for that, mate. Anyway, so healthy by all reports this season. I think he's going to take that number one mantle. The only two he's contending with are Flynn and Briggs. They both did show flashes last year, though, which is concerning for him to play that solo ruck. I only want to go there if he's solo ruck, basically. I don't think he's shown in the past playing with Goldie, playing with Gawn. When they're playing together, he's just not an option. He can't really do much forward. He needs to be the number one option. I do think he will, though. And let's wait and see.
Yep.
But Prusy, I reckon this is the year. Stay healthy, please, mate.
I think as long as you've got that Flynn handcuff, I think
that's it.
Yeah, I think then he's worth the punt.
Yeah, I did have that in my last bit of my notes. You definitely have to go the handcuff.
Yeah, so as long as you got that handcuff, definitely worth a punt because Flynn's not the worst player either. And I actually see Flynn playing it forward a little bit this year. That's just my little gut feel. No brand associated with that one. But so that's just my gut feel this year. But I think Bruce does, if he remains fit, he's number one ruck and he'll put up some decent fantasy scores because I've seen him do it in the past.
Jesse Hogan. The next player here. Obviously, we're not usually that big on key position players. I know you're especially not a fan.
Never draft them. Only draft them if like it's super late and there's like someone who's going to play each week still available there.
Yeah. Well, he's probably one of the players that we've seen with big potential. One of the only real players in the recent history that has had that huge potential. Just obviously hasn't hit it since about 2018, where he averaged 89 AFL fantasy points. So it's kind of looking like that was an outlier. Had the perfect season in Melbourne at the time. That the team was number one for inside 50s that year. They were just hitting him on the tit every time. You had Tom McDonald playing alongside him, playing that perfect role beside him, which he came back and played this year very nicely, Tom McDonald. But since then, hasn't really been a good situation for him footy-wise, on and off the field, going to Freo. Now he's at GWS. Came in and actually had decent impact, averaged around that 69 point, which I think we were talking about. If you get around 70, you're looking almost fieldable in the forward line. And I think he can take it one step forward this year if he's fit and healthy. I'll have to wait for reports, but I just see if GWS can find a smoother path to goal. They finished 13th in inside 50s last year. So you look at the difference when he averaged 89 when they were first in inside 50s at Melbourne to 13th in inside 50s, he drops like 20 points. And that's, I think he can kind of lift it in between, maybe go the mid-70s. And it's kind of the argument I had the other week with Joe Danaher. You had
an argument with Joe Danaher.
I had an argument of speaking about Joe Danaher, thinking he can sort of reach those 75 to 80.
I'd love to hear what you and Joe Danaher would argue about.
Yeah.
Beef that with. Yeah.
So anyway, Hogan, you're not going to pick him because he's a key position player?
Look, if I'm picking players, like if I'm picking a key position player, he's probably one of the ones that I kind of would think is a better fantasy type. Like I did this last night on the rankings pod for key defenders. I'm just going to pull up the best. Actually, no, I use these exact numbers. So the best key forward last year in fantasy was Tim Membry, then Tom Hawkins, then Taylor Walker, then Tom McDonald, then Joe Danaher. Like none of them, like they're okay.
Yeah,
but I feel like
we're not talking about you drafting him in your first round.
But let me continue. So I'm feeling like at the time when you're taking someone like Hogan, do you want to go someone that might put up 70, or do you take a flyer on like a younger kid who might just burst onto the scene type thing, or a rookie that you can kind of stash away, who's probably got a better chance of being a fantasy scorer, a rookie that you stash away? Like I said, Hogan is one of the key forwards that can put up good fantasy numbers. Like we've seen him do it before. I think 2018 it was 89 fantasy points there. Definitely can do it. But I just think the way the game's played these days, it's just very tough for key forwards.
It's funny you said kind of Taylor Walker in that mix. That's the kind of guy with the ceiling that he showed last year that I could kind of see Hogan doing if they can start feeding him in there.
Just don't know if it happens.
I just think they've kind of like lost that additional player as well in Jeremy Finlayson as well. And I'm going to talk about another guy that I think is going to come and fill that role next.
Sorry, just Simon Moore in the chat said the social media photos and the gym pics have been through the roof regarding Hogan, I assume. So
okay. I said, I'm as a guy that you're not going to have to, the opportunity cost that you're going to have to draft him, you can probably pick him up in your last pick of the draft.
Yeah,
he doesn't play that many. He does not play that many games per year. That's the only knock on him, really, as well as trying to hit those ceilings of the past. I just think you're not going to pay up too much for him. He could pop.
All right, Dossie, 2 more players to go. Let's get through and we'll spend a bit of time on these.
Jake Riccardi burst onto the scene back in 2020, putting up huge numbers, BCV, 100 plus in a couple of games. Ankle injury in the preseason last year slowed that progress. If we got to be quick, he just absolutely dominated reserves levels though. 186 and 170 in the VFL last year, Heff.
Yeah.
112 from his 6 games. Available as a mid-forward, though, in AFL fantasy.
It's weird. Yeah, well, I guess he played a bit. Did he play midfield at AFL level? Because in the VFL, he went back on the half-back line for 2 games. I just don't remember him
playing wing at AFL level, but I might be wrong.
Maybe in the VFL he did
That's what I would have thought that he got it from.
Yeah.
Anyway, this guy, like I just mentioned before, Finlayson gone to your boys.
Yep.
I think that role's now his. Especially Zach Sproul was the other one that played, and he's got off-season surgery. He's going to miss the start of the season. Riccardi, for me, he shows a fantasy ceiling.
For sure.
I'm keen to get involved in Riccardi this year.
That 170 was not a key forward role. Those 2 big scores, I'm pretty sure it was defence. They're all saying so. He was just across half back.
Yeah.
just beating up on minnows and just taking so many marks. Yeah, and that's where it comes. So we're not going to see that at AFL level. I think they did try it for 1 week at AFL level, and it was just a failure. So I think it was
He's
the 1 week
player,
back.
He's 22.
Yeah. But no, the thing is, I just see him again. It's basically the same as above, just key forwards. Just the way the trends work with them, I avoid because, 1 or 2 might pop here and there, but it's a very low percentage that do.
He scored 109 and 104 adjusted in that role in 2020.
I know. But then, you're looking, I think he was dropped by the end of the year as well.
He was.
Yeah. So, it's, I know that there's always a few times and people getting purple patches and things like that. And definitely you want someone like that in your grand final that goes big and he's got the potential to do it.
He's just not talked about as a young player with a lot of fantasy potential enough. I think he, having that ceiling at VFL level, what if they just do put him in that role at AFL level at some point? I just think one to watch as a late flyer. Tanner Bruin's my last one, and this is just an absolute loose pick. 38 average in the AFL last year. Looked absolutely lost in the early days, but it was weird because he kicked 4 snags in the trial game, I think. Looked ready to go, then just saw the deer in headlights round 1 and just didn't look ready. Developed well in the VFL, put up some okay scores. Then late in the season, randomly started getting centre bounces.
Well, I think as a junior he was a midfielder, wasn't he?
Yeah, but just, late in the season, and I think it was in finals, 25% CBAs in the second final when they got eliminated. That just shows that he's potentially one of these guys that we should be thinking about as an option in the future for GWS.
Yeah.
Deep dynasty stash.
So many mouths to feed in that midfield.
Stash. Just one to watch. Special mentions, Nick Haynes, James Peatling and Nick Shipley. Do you want me to talk about him?
Quickly, briefly.
All right, Nick Haynes, just one of those quality players. I think we've talked about him. The reason I don't want to talk about him stacks is because you guys would have covered him so much last year as that waiver pick or 70 to 80 guy. I think he's good to go there again. Wouldn't be too excited. James Peatling was one that the Oracle brought to my attention last year. 100 average in the VFL for the Giants.
Big first game, didn't he?
Big first game, went 82 on debut.
Yep.
Average 55 though. I think he only played 3 games for the year, but breakout watch again for him. He's a big scorer. Just depends if he gets the role in defence. So he's a guy. Just keep an eye on James Peatling because he's another one. A lot of these GWS youngsters don't get any love in the draft circles, but Peatling and Riccardi for me, a couple of nice ones. Maybe Bruin in 10 years. Nick Shipley is the other one, just did really well at VFL level. I wouldn't be too excited, but...
Didn't he get delisted?
Did he?
I think he did. Unless he got re-rookied.
Don't draft him, man. Don't draft him. He was a good VFL player.
Those VFL numbers
Pull one out for Nick Shipley. Pull one out.
All right. That'll wrap up the club analysis there. But if you are enjoying these podcasts each week, please consider becoming a member. We've got some great bonus resources up there. We talked about the rankings that are coming out tomorrow earlier in the show, but we've also got the drafty analysis document, the breakout tracker, and all the state league fantasy scores that just sucked Dossie in there. So they're quite a handy resource, so you can actually see who's going back to the twos and scoring well and might make the difference, might make the jump to the next level. If you enjoy the show, perhaps just join up as a member and support the podcast. There's a link in the description below if you are keen to join. Dossie, do you want to read out the gold members' names this week?
Yes, I would love to, Heff, off the cuff.
Well, I've butchered in the last 2 weeks.
So you haven't snuck in anyone here. All right, Jai Quarala, thank you very much for becoming a gold member. Craig Cullifeld. Carlefelt. All right. Matt Tarrant, Daryl Woodford, thank you very much. Nick Mildenhall, Matty Rendell, Cameron Fox, Tom Puzzi, Trent Larosignol. Is that good?
Larosignol?
Larosignol.
There we go with that.
And Rory O'Brien. Thank you all very much for becoming gold members.
Just one of the gold members, Matt Tarrant there. Go see his Fringe show. I think he's got 2 shows this year. So go have a look at that. Ooh. Rory O'Brien's an old footy mate as well. So premiership captain of Kazers B grade grand final.
Any relation of the big rivals? Has he got the same sort of running gait out there?
Oh, it'd be close, I reckon, actually. But bit smaller in stature though. But anyway, we'll move on to the podcast reviews. We got one from the end of last year, and this is actually our last review available on Apple, so we need more people jumping on and reviewing the podcast for us, so please I
don't know if I've done one yet. I might be able to sneak in there. Cool. I didn't have an Apple for iPhone for ages.
Now you've got an iPhone, you can actually do it. And there's also the Spotify ratings now as well, so if you're not an Apple user and you do use the Spotify, make sure you jump on and give us a 5-star there, because we had a disgusting 4.7 the other week. What's going on there?
You filthily messaged me
like, a big vomit emoji. So we're up to 4.8 now, so hopefully we can boost that one. Anyway, so James Masters has wrote this review last year. A great year. It was his first year listening to us. Absolutely loved it. Thanks fellas, for looking forward to next year and your thoughts already. So you're already getting our thoughts now. So James Masters would be a happy person. Anyway, we'll move on and we'll get on to the listener questions right now. All right, the listener questions. Again, just apologies. We used to answer every question that came to us. Now we just get so many we can't actually get through them all. So we try to pick the ones that we haven't already about players that we haven't already discussed on the podcast tonight already. So the first one comes from Milne AFF. Dossie, how does 2022 look for the following? He wants to know about Alex Davies, Jez McLennan, and Tom Green we already talked about, but talk to us about Alex Davies and Jez McLennan.
Yeah, Jez McLennan not interested at all until I hear anything. I haven't even seen those social media splatterings
Was
yet.
delisted and re-rookied as well, so that's not good sign.
Just I think we've just heard too much, but not enough kind of actual, there's just not enough hype around him as well.
Yeah.
Just get some
there
hype
was
out
in his
there.
draft year.
Yeah, if Gold Coast throws some hype out, say he's vying for a spot, I'll be interested. But no, the two I'm keen on. Tom Green's absolutely the top of that list. Just looking at it, really keen on him. Obviously, already spoken about him. Alex Davies, though, that's an interesting one, and just another guy that is looking to vying for a midfield spot at Gold Coast. It's going to be a while to wait before he cracks in, though. And, we might see he might be a guy in the Amy series. We see trialled as a midfielder. He was used in round 23 really quite prominently in a midfield role in limited time on ground. Scored well too. So 65% time on ground for 63 in the last game of the season. That's where we see them trial, the next wave of, especially Gold Coast, who's out of the mix of finals. They were just trialling him in a spot. Played really well, and a guy to watch out for, but they're so saturated in that midfield role, and that's where he wants to play. So skeptical he'll play, but long-term stash, very nice. Tom Green's the only one there that's going to be relevant this year.
I can always count on you to talk about some Gold Coast reserves, because you do a bit of Fiorini watching the VFL. So
I did. I won't need to anymore, though. Pure, he's a lock in the 22.
Next question, Dusty.
From Russ, how long until we can't talk about Canelio on the pod?
Oh, we guess we just talked about that as well, but not long. I think if he's going to average 80 plus, he'll be up there, tearing up the track. So I don't think it's going to be very long. So next question.
This one's from @DanK101. Thoughts on Max Holmes, Cooper Stevens, and Sam Flanders as long-term stashes in a dynasty league?
We talked about we talked about Holmes before, so we won't talk about him now. But with Stevens, he's just a name that comes up a lot on the Twitter sphere, I guess. And I've never really paid much attention to him purely because he only averaged 68 in the NAB league, and I know he got injured that year. But if you look at the VFL level that he played at last year, he was only averaging 68 as well. Plays an inside midfielder, so there is potential that once a few of these older guys come out of the side, he comes in. But I'm just not sure of his fantasy ceiling. That's all. He's never really shown it for me. That's all.
What he has shown us is an immaculate rig.
Yes.
And please, listeners, after you've heard this, if you've made it this far, please, we need a crop of Cooper Stevens with Heff face on it for the gym. I'll just show you that if you haven't seen it.
Oh, jeez.
It's a monumental rig.
Not bad.
Anyway, he goes all right in the gym. That's probably the only thing I've known. I think he actually got injured in his actual draft year, so that's why I don't think his numbers are that impressive.
I said that in there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then Flanders, I reckon he'd need to bump up those midfield minutes to be super fantasy relevant. 10 to 40% average in the games that he played last year, but I'm just not sure he bumps up just with players like Rao coming back, and now we've got Fiorini going in there full time and things like that. Was a half reasonable junior scorer though, so I'd stash someone like Flanders just in case. Listed as a forward too, so if you can on someone like Holmes, then why not have a go at Flanders as well? So yeah. Next question.
Yeah, so Segler or Bruce to sneak ruck forward status.
That's from Toby B. Ramen team, isn't it? Yes. I think it's possible with Bruce, because I reckon if my theory about Flynn playing forward, they might rotate, but I'd still see him playing as the number one ruck. And I reckon Segler just rucks as well. I don't really see him playing forward. There's enough tall forwards up Geelong that they've got, like we talked about, Radigalia, Cameron and Hawkins probably being the main three up there. There's no reason for Segler to go up there. I think he plays ruck and goes to the bench, and Radigalia pinch hits. Yeah. That's my theory. Next one.
Agreed. This one from Gorn Frishen. How do you see Sam Taylor progressing? So key defender. I didn't mention him personally. I don't think he's a super. He's just such a lockdown defender. But
he's either 100 or 40. Like that were like his scores last year.
Harris Andrews style.
Yeah, basically.
You're going to get a couple of streams, more of a super coach guy.
Yeah, but I did do a few notes here, did a bit of research. So yeah, like I reckon he's going to be a gun player, like just not fantasy. Because like if you look at the gun fantasy, key fantasy defenders, like the only good one is Luke Ryan, really, and that's because he just gets so many kick-ins. Like that's why he's such a good fantasy player. So he gets a lot of points from kick-ins and he averaged 87. The next best key defenders in the common terms of fantasy were Wiedering and Darcy Moore. So they're not really guys you're going to be going after super. Those guys just averaged 74. So not awful. Definitely, D4, D5 range there. But the thing is, like, those guys got kick-ins as well. Like, Taylor didn't get one kick-in last year. So if you want to use the Luke Ryan example as like a beacon of hope, some key defenders can go big. Like, he needs those kick-ins to get him, and I just don't see him getting that. That's all.
He might be one of the best players in the competition one day.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Not one of the fantasy. Yeah, not a fantasy player.
Yeah. All right, next one.
All right, the next question is from Yeats. Yeet Briggaz. Yeet Briggaz. Lukosius, Heppel, Zeeble, keep one, draft one, lose one.
This one was hard, I think. Just, I think you're definitely keeping Lukosius out of all of those. Surely, Dossie, you had him ranked, 3rd in your defenders last night for the little bit of an Easter egg out there.
Only, a
little bit of an Easter egg there for you, so a little bit of a sneak preview.
Yeah, I've got exactly the same 3 as you, though.
Cool. Yeah. Then I'll draft Heppel and just lose Zeeble. Like, Zeeble, I reckon, is like one injury away from just being gone.
Honestly, you could there's probably an argument out there for the draft Zeeble, lose Heppel, but I'm in the same camp as you.
Yeah.
On that one. And
if you went the other way, I wouldn't.
Yeah, Kays is probably on the same.
Kays was high on Zeeble.
He was high on Heppel though too.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
so.
I think he'd probably in the same way. What's the next one, Dusty?
Nick B. West, how many Gold Coast midfielders are relevant and how do we rank them? Sharp, Fiorini, Constable, Rao, Flanders and Butterick coming back. Dude, why didn't you talk about Constable?
That's a very good question. Yeah, probably should have been there, but probably because I just don't see him as best 22 straight away. That's all. Jeez, that scared me. Probably because I don't see him as best 22 straight up, but yeah, maybe we should. We'll talk. I'm sure we'll talk about him some stage.
Next week's podcast is a Constable 1 hour and a half
special.
Pod.
Yeah,
special.
I'm sure we'll talk about him when the Amy series comes around and the trial matches. So don't stress too much. We'll have some time there.
Sorry for waking up.
Yeah, jeez, poor little man. But anyway, let's rank those players that were mentioned. So for me, I've got Fiorini as the best fantasy score out of those. Then Rao, Sharp, Constable, Flanders. Butterick plays defence these days, doesn't he? Like I see him as he's going to be like a little Caleb Daniel, isn't he?
Yeah. I'm not big on him from a fantasy perspective. I think he's more of a lockdown, but yeah.
I don't mind. I like if you compare him to that trajectory, I guess he's because he's small.
Caleb Daniel's a freak though.
Yeah,
he's a
true.
ball winner.
Yeah,
like
true.
Butterick's a lockdown defender.
But
I don't see the love for
Butterick.
that.
Butterick was huge. Butterick was the second best junior fantasy scorer of his draft year.
Was he?
Because he plays a midfielder.
Oh, okay.
So he was quite good. And he's actually not a bad. He's actually got decent skills as well. So half decent skills. So I can see him going okay because he does have those kind of
I know he's very highly rated internally.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so that's why I've got him there because I'm not sure what his efficiency is like and things like that because I just haven't seen enough of him. But yeah, and I know from a purely just stat getting potential, he's up there with someone like Caleb Daniel as well. So
TTQ 03 will Perryman maintain, increase or decrease his 2021 average?
Increases slightly for mine, just through that natural progression. I think he's got his role locked down now. Might lose defender status after this year, but I think as a result of that, he does increase his average a bit. Maybe 5, 10 max, nothing massive. But yeah.
I think I'd say he maintains.
Maintains?
Yeah. Okay. Simon Moore, thoughts on Narkle? Is he ahead of Parfitt for CBA use and next in line status? Seem to be there in line and great points per minute. I
don't know. Like Parfitt was one of the main CBA attendees last year, wasn't he? For Geelong? I've actually got him up here. I'll get him up. What do you think, Dossie? I'll get them up.
Narkle, yeah, I think he's just going to be that low time of ground. We've seen like a guy like Cam Guthrie who we see as being, a fantasy gun, and he still gets super low time on ground. I think Narkle, if he ever, gets in there permanently, I think he'll still get low time on ground. So I still think Parfitt's going to be the guy this year.
Parfitt went to 50% of the Cats CBAs last year. Narkle from the games he played went to 35% of them. So I think
I love his, points per minute. I just think he's a low time on ground player.
It doesn't have the tank. That's the issue. So the points per minute always looks impressive, and that's why people sort by that column, which my ranking spreadsheet now has points per minute numbers in it, Dossie. I'm slowly building that. I'm still not sure when I'm going to release it. I still need to double check.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, I've already got it.
But yeah. Well, you don't have the latest version.
That one. At David 50518-535, not as smooth as last time. Will Charlie Ballard, ever be relevant for keepers? # better than Ridley. Wow, big call.
Maybe as a streamer. He plays key position, doesn't he? I just don't like them.
I actually like him.
I don't like him.
I've got him as a stasher for me in my draft.
He pops up with decent scores. Like, he'll take a few marks and things like that and have some big games. But
it's more the way he plays. He's not locked down. He is that floater.
Yeah.
And I like that. For fantasy, it's not as bad. And, I'm with you. I'm with you on this one. And
I'll take him
years old, I think he can.
I'll take him late as a streamer. Yeah. I'm happy with that. Not going to be better than Ridley.
Justin Woodcroft. Will Isaac Smith get DPP from Ultimate Footy before the season or during? Bloke was taking kickouts last season.
I did notice that, but I think more the DPP status has more to do with starting positions and where you're spending the time, not just the fact that you're taking kickouts. Like, he's taking kickouts because
he sprints to the square to get it.
Like he just wants the stats. Wings. He's a bit of observable thirst there.
Off the charts.
So he plays long up and down the ground on that wing, and it just takes a few kick-ins. So if you watch the centre bounce tendencies, he starts on the wing a lot and doesn't spend a heap of time in defence when the ball's moving through there. So I don't think so. Last question here, Joss. I'm going to ask you this one because I seem to have been asking a lot of them. At TWR asks, last keeper spot, 13 keepers, 12 teams. Do I take Josh Dacos and his job security or punt on Braden Fiorini being best 22?
What? What? Josh Dacos?
Apparently so, yes.
Over Fiorini?
Yep. That's the question.
TWR. Come on.
Right.
Yeah, it's Fiorini. Look at his, sorry.
Are you offended by this question?
That baffles me. Sorry, TWR. I'm sure you're an avid listener.
He is, yes.
Fiorini, just, the fantasy ceiling, you don't want to punt just because to miss out on potentially getting an absolute superstar fantasy player. I understand what he's coming from job security wise. Josh Dacos, like last year, was he even, he's...
Nah, it was barely in the midfield mix,
wasn't he? He's B2P. He's permanently B2P. He's never really hit those straps apart from 1 year on the wing where I think he got, in the 80s.
Well, wait and see what happens this year. I don't think he's permanently going to be back to the pod, but he's down at the moment. Fiorini's an elite scorer.
Fiorini. Yeah. I think, to your point, I think he'll actually be firmly in that 22 now that Greenwood's gone. I know they've got a lot of kids there.
What about your boy Constable? Come straight in? Alongside him?
Alongside, yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah. I think, Fiorini's established now. He's going to be in there. Keep him.
Yeah, I do think. I just don't think
you
throw away.
Aggressive, TW.
You don't throw away someone who can score like that, and it's shown that they can score that. They just need the opportunity. He's now getting the opportunity. I think he's fine. But
was that in there to trigger me, do you think?
I think it definitely was. I actually left that question for you just to trigger you. Yeah. Anyways, we'll wrap it up there. So thank you for listening to the Keeper League podcast for another week. If you enjoyed it, make sure you sign up as a member to support the podcast. Link will be in the description below. Make sure you get around our socials at Keeper League Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Instagram's slowly growing, so thanks to the people that are jumping on there. I think we're up to 350 followers there, even though followers don't really matter. But it just makes us look a little bit more professional if you've got a few there. So thanks for that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, especially if you're watching it on YouTube now. But and listen to the Pod. That's the other thing that we can say.
Yeah, episode's
just recorded. Yeah, we just put out, is it?
Talking about midfielders for AFL Fantasy Classic. If you dabble in AFL Fantasy Classic,
you and I definitely do. Kay's not so much.
No.
Well, he dabbles poorly.
When he's back, I won't be able to talk about it, so we've got to get him in as much.
It's 2 against 1, all right? Unless he gets really aggressive and starts throwing things around. we can talk about what... I don't know if our listeners will like that, that's all. Maybe we won't do that. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for listening for another week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Farewell.